You know, we just did a whole video about the Dreamcast, and of course, I start finding out that more Dreamcast games are coming out this year. I know it sounds weird, right? Because the Dreamcast came out in 1999, was around for a few years before it was abruptly discontinued because it wasn't doing so well against the PS2. And all of a sudden, we start seeing more Dreamcast games coming out. Of course, we saw like Pierre Solar, for example, released on the Dreamcast, but now we have actual games being ported to the Dreamcast, and even games broken down to the original code and then rebuilt essentially from the ground up for the Dreamcast. And this is really interesting. So what am I talking about exactly? Well, there is a website called Dreamcast Junkyard, and they really cover the Dreamcast as you would expect, and it's a pretty cool site. They even did a full article and everything with an interview of the publisher and developer doing all this stuff for the Dreamcast. Very cool read. I'll put a link to that article in the description. Very, very good stuff though. I would check it out. So what's happening is there's a French publisher and developer by the name of Josh Prod, and what they're doing is they're bringing right now 2 games that are coming up for pre-order. Both of those games are very interesting. One you probably already know. You may know both of them. One you definitely know, called Flashback from the Super Nintendo. It was also, I believe, on the 3DO, and it was on the PC. Now, the one on the Super Nintendo ran okay. It wasn't the best version of it compared to the other 2, especially the PC version, which had things like intro cutscenes, stuff like that. Overall, it ran better, obviously, on the PC, which makes sense, right? Anyway, they actually got the original code. They got it from developers, which is really cool, from the original IP holders, Delphine Software. They used the original source code and they broke it down and built it for the ground up for the Dreamcast. So it will use things like the VMU. It will have the intro cutscenes, for example, from the PC version. And what's really cool is the VMU will add a save anywhere function. So it's going to be very interesting for the Dreamcast, and they are going to be in physical form. Now you may ask, well, yeah, of course be in physical form. Well, a lot of people now for the Dreamcast are using other methods of playing games aside from the disc-based unit. For example, they will load things onto SD cards even and play it that way. So technically they could even release, maybe even sell the ISO or ROM, whatever you want to call it, to people. They could buy it and then just load it on their device. I like the idea of loading it onto CDs instead. Of course, you want to make sure your Dreamcast is old enough, because I believe it was something like if it's after November of 2000, they really took that support out. So that's why those Dreamcasts won't actually play burn games. But anyway, back to the topic here. The other one is 4x4 Jam. You may have heard of that one possibly because, believe it or not, it's on Android and iOS devices, and it was a game on the PSP. I remember this specifically on the PSP because I believe I was working, I want to say at GameStop when it came out. I remember looking at it and we tried it out on PSP because back then the PSP was new and cool, and the visuals were amazing because it was right there with like PS2 visuals on the go. But the big thing here is that they are porting a game from a PSP unit or iOS Android device with ARM, and they're moving it over to the Dreamcast. Not only are they moving over to the Dreamcast, it actually seems to run better on the Dreamcast than it did on the PSP or even Android devices. I think it looks a little sharper, and the frame rate seems better as well. Now, 4x4 Jam is kind of cool because it's like an open world style off-road racing game, and then of course they have actual time trials or just straight up races. But it's another really good look at what the Dreamcast can do nowadays. It can take games from the PSP or iOS and move it over to there. And what's interesting here is really the possibilities then, because if this developer is able to take things like Flashback, break it down, and then build it back up for the Dreamcast, or do things like port games that were on Android, iOS, or the PSP, really tells me that developers, if they want to, can do some really cool stuff with the Dreamcast hardware. It's really up to them if they want to. I can understand why they might not want to, because it's kind of a niche type market, but it's really cool to see, and I would like to see more games go to the Dreamcast, especially more retro games. Could you imagine if something like, say, Undertale got moved to it? I think it'd be kind of neat. It'd be cool fan service. Would it make a lot of practical business sense for a bigger company to do that? Probably not, because there's not a massive market like I've said. It's just a cool idea, and I like news like this. I like seeing retro games moved into like the more current era of games. Very neat. I like seeing this kind of news. We'll see how things go with their pre-orders and when the games actually go out. So what's going to happen is pre-order August 4th, and then at that point they will ship them September, according to them, the following month. It's going to be on a website called Rush On Games, £30. It's up to you if you wanted to buy it. It'll just be cool when it gets out to the wild and people unbox them, check them out, and see the quality. So exciting stuff. I hope we see more games for the Dreamcast coming out It's just cool to see. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.